cask beer is one of the best ways of expressing how a beer can be. What I love about it is the thing that I also hate about it is that you can go to a pub and you will have your beer and it will just blow your mind. And then you can go to another pub and you know that it's Cellarmanship. Like if you're in Liverpool, best places to drink our beer are the Eggbooth Tap and the Grapes on Knight Street.
We're in Sutton Weaver on the outskirts of Runcorn with Chapter Brewing. Your beers are based on books. How did that come about?
I used to be an English teacher. I moved to kind of the northwest in 2013, teaching in and around Liverpool and St Helens for the first 3 years as an English teacher. And then when I decided to leave teaching, I thought, what would be a nice thing to keep a little bit of what I love and kind of blend that with the brewing side of things as well. So all the beers have a literary element to them. I try not to go with just like books, but you know, most of them kind of named after a line of a poem or a certain phrase that we liked from a story. Sometimes we'll make a beer and that reminds us of something, and that's how the name comes about. Or sometimes we'll come up with the name first and make a beer that ties in to that. So all the beers have with them in lieu of like a food pairing on the back of the can, or if you go onto Untapped or something like that, it will say like a reading suggestion. So you can actually go and read up on what we've made if you want to. I mean, you also absolutely don't have to.
Yeah.
So
could be a bit much after.
Yeah. Yeah, especially if you've had a few beers. I mean, I really didn't want it to be pretentious. It was purely there to be an extra little thing. And we have one guy from Finland who has read all of the reading suggestions that have come with the beers, and that's quite a nice thing to have.
Use a local artist called Boneface.
I started this brewery with another teacher, a primary school teacher called Alex, and after about kind of 9 months or so, it wasn't quite working out for him and what he was trying to do. With the teacher, he couldn't quite fit in, so he ended up leaving the brewery. We're still friends, but his best mate from school was Boneface. The guy grew up to be Boneface, and we ended up kind of being friends. He started doing the artwork, and we continued doing the artwork with him. We also ended up adopting Boneface's dog, so got that other extra little bit of collateral if it's ever kind of like delays on the timeline, right? But yeah, it's great. So he's an amazing guy. He's got so much kind of creative talent, and it's so kind of humbling for me to have him to play with. Really, like we go to the pub, sit down, we have a chat. I say, this is a poem that I've read, or this is a piece of text that I've read. Talking through it, he takes a few notes, we have some beers. 2 weeks later, we get amazing artwork. Like the one of the beer that I'm drinking now, Mahogany. It's a 4-line poem by John Hegley, and he came out kind of with 2 weeks kind of notice. He came out and just made this amazing piece of art. He does the artwork for our glasses as well. Often this is more just like him playing, so he just kind of makes something. So I've got this design for you for a t-shirt or glass or whatever, but very lucky to be able to have access to someone like that.
It's like homebrewing.
I actually started kind of helping out at breweries sooner than I was kind of really brewing a lot at home. But when I was brewing at home, I was making dark beers and big IPAs. So as Lazarus, which is our flagship IPA, it's called Lazarus because we resurrect it with a different hop each time. That was the beer that really made me realise that maybe I could do something with this. Making a big IPA. I lived on the narrowboat at the time, so it wasn't like a big volume. It was like less than 5 litres. Making that and taking it to Mad Hatter, that was kind of a big moment for me. I was like, if I can make this on a narrowboat, a corridor, basically a steel corridor on the Mersey, then maybe I can do something bigger.
This beer is forgotten. Decibels.
Yes.
A Belgian style Abbey beer.
This place was a brewery before we took it on, and they were called DB Brewing. And the first beer we ever made here was using all their old ingredients that they had left here, and we used it, just did like a dry run, and actually it came out all right. And we liked what it was doing and how the kit worked for us. So we thought, well, how can we incorporate that into this kind of literary idea? And DB, I don't know what it stood for when the brewery was here, but DB is the nomenclature for decibels in physics, and it was what they'd left behind. So I like the idea of Forgotten Decibels as a name. And then I was like, well, how am I going to crowbar this into a book? And we went with The Spire by William Golding, the guy who did Lord of the Flies. And there's this great quote about, the silence, like kind of silence was deafening kind of thing. And I quite like how that played with the decibels and the stuff that it was left over. And now every year we brew it in February, and we brew a version of Forgotten Decibels, and it sells terribly because it's 8% in Belgian, but it's a little bit of our heritage from here. We did it as the first beer we ever made, so it's something nice to brew once a year. When we first started, we had open fermenters, but we've switched those out. It's something a little bit shinier. One of our old fermenters is still over there. We now use that conditioning our cask really to create these. Yeah. We picked up these tanks from various places, a couple of new ones. One that we got with our friends from Carnival Brewing in Liverpool, and the other two were actually Mad Hatter's former tanks. They sadly folded in 2 or 3 years ago now. But that's where I started doing all my brewing, was with Mad Hatter and Gad over there. Yeah. And that's it, and we've got our tap room. So we're only open 2 days a week, Friday and Saturday from 1 till 7. But we get a nice kind of steady stream of people throughout the day. Fridays tend to be busier than Saturdays. And then we've got new fermenters, a little bar here, which is essentially a big almost like a homebrew kegerator, and we can get 12 lines in there. At the moment we've got 9. We're looking to get some guest stuff in. We've also got our cider as well. I run a cidery with a friend of mine over in Delamere Forest, which we launched this year. And then our barrel aging program, so all of these barrels are currently full with our birthday projects and actually ferments and things. And once we're done with these barrels, they go to the cidery over in Delamere Forest.
Every sort of tap room, like how soon did it open?
Might have been 2019. The intention was always that we'd only be here for 6 months, and now it's nearly 6 years later. We were planning on moving into Liverpool and just kind of didn't really get around to it. But we're doing monthly open days, and they're always quite good, but it didn't really feel worth being open all the time. And then when the pandemic happened, we started opening just as a kiosk. So this little door behind us here, we had a shutter, and we just served people draft to take away. And after that, and after the fact that when we were allowed to open outside, people came and sat in the rain drinking pints of Cask because you couldn't get it from anywhere else. We thought, there's something here. I think it was April last year we started opening every week. We're really lucky because we're not exactly the most accessible place in the world. We're a little bit kind of in this kind of weird hinterland where there's not really much apart from us and the motorway. But we're amazingly lucky that we have all these kind of regulars who come down every week on a Friday after work, and those are the people that have meant that we are still here. We're very lucky to have them.
You're not too far from Liverpool.
Mad Hatter is where I started. When I was a teacher, my half-term holidays, Easter holidays were spent helping them out. The guys at Black Lodge, you've got Carnival, Top Rope, Neptune as well, who are kind of contemporaries really. We all met at the homebrew club in what used to be the 23 club, and out of that one homebrew club, I think there's been 3 or 4 breweries that have come out and gone into Liverpool, and we're all friends. We all drink our beers, and we drink each other's beers, and if it's particularly good we say so, and if something's a bit weird with it we say so, because we look out for each other. Well, Liverpool in general is so friendly, and the Liverpool scene is very similar to that.
Yeah, you do experiment with quite a few different styles.
When we started, I think we had a bit of a homebrew approach, so we did lots of different things. Everyone said you've got to have a core range, and I was like, no, I don't have a core range. What the pandemic has done is I'm not going to say it's curtailed our creativity, but it has definitely made us kind of realise that you need to have some core solid beers that you bang out all the time. So for us, it's the Torden House is 3.9% pale, Candata is a 4.7%, American Pale Ale, Fossil Dinner 3.5% pale, hazy pale, and Dead Man's Fist, which is our multi-award winning, it's won 2 awards, so it's multi-award winning now, multi-award winning smoked porter. And we have kind of focused a bit on that, just to kind of make sure that we can keep going, because the pandemic was terrible for everybody, and hospitality in particular. We decided we need to have a little bit of a stable base to then jump off from. So we haven't done anything totally mad for a bit, but we like playing with vegetables and fruit and things like that in sours. So we did a celery sour called Roadside Picnic, and that was with a guy called Paul Spraggett, who used to work for Mad Hatter, and he was the guy who came up with the Tzatziki sour, which now Orbit made down in London, which is soured with yogurt. It's got mint and ouzo and cucumber in it, and from that we brewed a celery sour that's got lots of celery and celery seed in it. We've made beetroot and hibiscus sours. We've done watercress and grapefruit, plum and black pepper, all these kind of things that are quite good and quite interesting, and not necessarily, they're more things you'd find in a salad or something. So we're just slowly now starting to go back to the more interesting, more extrovert kind of out there stuff that we were doing prior to the pandemic.
You mentioned the Dead Man's Fist, smoked porter with the black pepper.
Yeah, I've always been a massive fan of Mark at Runaway, and his smoked porter is brilliant. And I was always kind of that in the back of my mind of doing something like that. And I was drinking Heavy Industries, I think it was called Nos, which is their smoked porter. I said, you know what, this has got a real kind of meaty, kind of almost steak-like thing. It'd be quite interesting if it had like a bit of pepper in it or something. And I said to Alex, can you give me some pepper? And I literally got pepper and was like stirred it into the beer and drank it and went, that's the beer I want to make. So what I then did is I went and looked at, like I do whenever I'm writing any recipe, I get about a dozen recipes and I look at them and I kind of almost take like an average, and then I go, well, that's what all of these beers are like, and I'm going to accent this little bit and that little bit. And we made Dead Man's Fist, and it was 5.5% beech smoked malt. It's got a real kind of richness. We ferment it quite warm, so it finishes quite high, so it's got a little bit of sweetness in there as well. And the black pepper, it's not like a chili beer where it builds and builds and builds and builds. It's just a little bit of an accent. If you have it on keg, you get lots of the pepper, and it's got a little bit of like prickliness to it. If you have it on cask, it's really smooth and rich, and it kind of really accents the smoke. The idea was that we'd make a beer that was an inaccessible style, and we tried to make it accessible through, almost like through novelty. It's got black pepper and whatever else. And it's been on our lists ever since, really. It's a beer that I always say if someone's doing any kind of cooking or anything, it's brilliant to throw into food as well. But it's unusual that a beer such as that has become a core beer. I think that's a testament to the recipe and the brewers, what they're doing with it, that it sells as well as it does. So this is the brewery, the brew floor. We moved in here in 2016. Some of these vessels were already here. We've done a little bit of modification to them, but with lots of breweries, you end up getting bits and pieces from all over the place. This is our cold liquor tank we got from Atton. This is our hot liquor tank, which is here when we got here. Our mash tun, which used to be twice the size, had no manway in it, and we modified that. We can get about 550, maybe 600 kilos in it at push, which means that we can get up to, in one mash, get up to around about 7-8% in the kettle. We've got a kettle there, all the crap's in the way, but it's run by a burner, so we haven't got electric or steam. It's just a big kind of bitumen burner down the bottom. Try and kind of say that gives us our unique flavour. In fact, it takes ages to get to the boil, but actually it's just inefficient. But for the moment, propane is cheaper than electricity, so we're going to stick with that. Some of the barrels that we emptied this week for barrel aged stout that we had. And on a brew day, we can come in and usually start mashing in around about 8:30, 9 o'clock. be myself or Damien or Paul. They're doing most of the brewing now. Originally it was just me on my own, but since the brewery started to develop, now I've got 4 members of staff, and I'm doing less of this and more of the boring admin stuff. Mahogany is one of our newer beers. Originally it was a beer that I came with the recipe in about 20 minutes as a bit of a panic, because our stock take hadn't quite worked out, and we were meant to be brewing Candata, which is our kind of core pale. So I just kind of made up a new beer using all sorts of bits and pieces, and then it went quite well. So what I did then was kind of refine the recipe, and this is the first batch of the new kind of slimlined, streamlined version of it. 5.7%, Citra, Azaka. We used a couple of different hopping methods, so we did like dip hopping, which I've not done before. In this we make like a soup, and then you rack out of the kettle onto that. And then we use a blend of 2 yeasts, 2 English yeasts, Windsor, and then we use, I think, a verdant yeast as well. The idea is to make something super low bitterness, hazy, juicy, fruity, all those sorts of fashionable things. We don't do lots of hazy pales as a general rule. There are people that we know who that's their kind of their thing. We're about 70% cask, but I do like making things like this that are 5.7%, strong but not kind of too heavy. It's not quite sessionable unless your session is going to be very short. Yeah. But yeah, it's a good beer, and I'm pleased with how it's come out. There's a few things I'm going to refine for next time as well. But from a beer that was a kind of real panic, what we're going to do today, actually coming out quite well and being able to streamline that's what's still quite exciting about brewing.
Are there any particular hops that you like to use?
I really like using the nice hops, basically, like everyone else. Yeah. The problem is they are really expensive, so I think you've got to kind of play this weird game of the fashionable hops are obviously going to be more expensive, but they are fashionable for a reason. I think probably my favourite hop is Columbus. We use that in pretty much all of our core beers. There's something quite kind of pungent, quite catty about it. So Columbus, I'd say, is probably my favourite, mostly because it's in so many of our beers. But I also really like things like Lorient, which is a new hop. I think it's only just been given the name Lorient, which is almost like I feel it's like a kind of a turbo Saz. It's like a big kind of noble hop, which is like the opposite of what noble hop's meant to be. And we use that in Bread and Circuses, which is our 3% pale, our KTS export, dry hopped Kolsch. The thing with hops is that these new ones come out and they're interesting, but it's fun to play with them and showcase them. And that's why I like Lazarus, because we try and just showcase one hop.
Do you have a house yeast?
I love the idea of having like a house yeast. We tried it with Unconsenting Soul, which is a 4.2% session pale. Kind of mixing stuff up. We were like, right, well, we're going to use half a pack of Windsor, a quarter of a pack of this, and a quarter of a pack of that. And I tried to play with that, and actually it was a bit of a faff. And we weren't getting the benefits from it. So for me, we've recently switched all of our yeast to WHC Labs, which is we get it through Lochran, who are based in Ireland, but they've got an amazing range of hops, really interesting yeasts, knowledgeable staff, and they look after us really well. So we use dried yeast, but for something like this one, we were talking about Mahogany earlier on, that's a half-half of Windsor and the Verdant New England. Again, just to experiment. Changing the yeasts adds a complexity which you wouldn't get from other things without wholesale changes. We aim for consistency, which is why we use dried yeast in all our beers.
You brew a lot of cask.
The romantic answer is that cask, for me, coming from the West Country where it's all kind of no sparkler, no head, coming up to the northwest and drinking cask was an absolute revelation. Like it was a completely different beast. As an aside to this, if you haven't read the article that Reese from Donzoko wrote on Pelican magazine about banked beers in Hartlepool, that's again worth a read. Just the way that people treat this vessel, this kind of mode of drinking beer in different ways is really interesting. For me, it's like digital is to analog. So with cask, like supposedly if you get a record it's always going to be better because you're not going to have the digital elements of cutting off the tops and the peaks and the troughs. Cask is, you'll always have, I'm going to put it on the line here, you'll always, cask in its best possible moment is always going to be better than keg, whereas keg is uniformly good. So there's something about cask, there's something quite romantic about it, there's something about the skill that it takes to not only produce it but also to serve it that you don't get with keg. However, the honest answer is we sell loads of it and we're good at it. So that's why we make more. That's why we make more cask than keg, because we sell more of it. Initially, that wasn't ever going to be the intention. The intention was to be more like 70% keg, and actually we're more like 70-75% cask.
Thanks for having me down.
No, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.